Hello, everyone. We're live. Thanks for joining. Let's kick off this new live stream event. Thanks all for joining. As you know, we are streaming this event in different platforms: Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And the event's recording will live in YouTube. But if you are joining live, congrats, because the perk about joining live is that you will be able to interact and ask questions at the end. We are going to start a Slido, so feel free to join using this QR code so that you can participate in the polls and also ask questions at the end of the event. Today we have JB with us, CPO at Kando. Today, GB will speak about how framing the problem correctly is necessary basis for a great successful product. During the talk, we will address key questions such as what to solve, when to solve, and for whom to solve it through practical real-life examples. Before we dive into it, a very short intro about myself. I'm Dionisio Redondo. I've been a product management consultant at Product People for the last 2 years. I have an academic background in industrial engineering. However, I've never worked as an industrial engineer. I started my career in business operations at Uber, and then soon realized that digital product was my passion. Therefore, I switched to the product side. As I mentioned, I work for Product People. In case you don't know Product People, we are a product management consultancy company. What we do is we do interim product management services for third companies, and how we give back to the community is through these kind of events. We organize on-site events as well, and also we are active on social media, sharing articles from our experience and sharing product knowledge with the community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn if you want to stay on the latest about what we are organizing. Before we kick it off, I would like to launch this warm-up question for the audience that you can answer by joining Slido through the QR code. Question is, how often do you start with an objective before framing the problems to solve? A, almost never. It usually starts with a solution being pushed onto product. I hope this is not the case for most of us, but sometimes it happens. B, from time to time, when product is given a chance to propose or reframe an objective. C, our product organization is able to reverse engineer the solutions to the objectives and problems. Or D, we almost always have discussions at the objective level with top management and can explore the problem solution space. Let's give it a second until we get answers in Slido. JB, I hope you have your answer pretty clear in mind, and you can share it with us in a minute.
I do.
Cool. All right. Answers are coming in. Answers are divided between A, B, and D. You will be able to give your answer throughout the talk. So after JB's turn, we can review again the poll. But so far, it is splits 1/3 for A, 1/3 for B, and 1/3 for D. Without further ado, the floor is yours. JB, over to you. Please feel free to kick it off.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, and thanks for the answers. This is a question that's really not troubling me, but a question I have in mind. So I wanted to have a talk here on starting from the problem. And as I suspected, quite a large number of you have A and B answers. And I'm going to try to make you come back home with this in mind, that before giving a solution a cape, you should ensure, or it's best to ensure, that the problem is real, painful, payable, and meets company objectives. Or if it doesn't, it's not a problem per se, but it's best to know it before you create a solution for those kind of problems. Okay, and so I'm going to make the parallel between two different companies I worked with or currently work for. First one is Inside. So Inside it's a company that was founded to ensure that the algorithmic progress in optimizations from academia can be applied to the industry. So kind of starting from a solution. And the other one is Kando, where I currently work, where the solution has been created by two persons from the field that we tackle, that is the caregiving for the elderly. So the two co-founders ran nursing homes for 10 years each. So they start really from the problem. And so I'm going to try to make the parallel here between the two and the things that I'm going to discuss. So first thing is, whenever there's no problem, there's no need for a solution. So I'm going to try to walk you through the process, the impact on the business, what is the frame, what is good problem framing, how to test that the frame is great, provide visibility on the risks that I use often to investigate solutions and to try to make sense of whether a solution and a problem are better framed or better solutions than others. And then provide you a framework that maybe you know, it's a quite known one, but that's one that I use often and that's useful to discuss with shareholders, is the opportunity solution trees. And so again, to phrase the giving a cape to a solution, what I'm going to try to convince you is that good problems are problems people recognize, they care about, because it could be recognized but not cared about, and that you can support with a business model. Okay? And what's important is that there is a difference between users and buyers sometimes, especially in B2B. And that's also a key part of the analysis that must be done. Right. One reason why I wanted to discuss this with you today is that building got faster. It's not the subject of the talk, so I won't elaborate on that, but building can get faster now with all the tools that we have access to. But then it means that choosing what to build, it matters even more. So you cannot really beat your competition by only speed, but what will differentiate your company is really to choose the right problems, right? And choose the problems that deserve the company attention, because one other risk of building getting faster is also that the company gets into many different directions. Okay, so let's deep dive into it. So what I want to explain here, it's really the way I see problem framing in the process of having market impact. So from a company objective, of course, you need to start with a company objective, a company goal. Then you can start a problem discovery. The problem discovery for me, it's really, okay, we have this objective. How come we're not meeting it? The objective could be, for instance, and that has been the case in the past at Kando, that 95% of the call reports are filled. So in nursing homes, whenever there is a distress call, they need to fill a call report, and only 60% of them were filled. So that's an objective, a business objective here that we wanted to tackle. And so then we started the problem discovery, about really from the field, listening to people before getting into solution discovery. There it was, okay, we have a set of possible solutions to improve the filling rate of those call reports, and then solution validation. So going back to the field with solution ideas and see if you can people how they would use your system. And that's, for me, the best way. It takes a bit of time, but way less time than going from the solution to and try to have market impact. And of course, for the market impact, one important point is to measure the impact that you had. So you had a goal and you need to measure that. So I talked about Kando, that is starting really from the problem discovery, but then to make the comparison with Inside, mainly started from the solution discovery, which means that more often than not, we were not having the market impact that we wanted to have initially, because either the problem was ill-framed or the problem was not the main problem of the persons that would pay for the solution, and that we discovered after having put a solution in production. Having a solution in production, it's super hard to kill. A few companies are able to do it consistently. So whenever you put something in production, it's inevitable. You will try to push it to the market, and it's not always a problem, but it means longer sales cycle and more costs for customer acquisition. And so why does it matter? Because, as I said, good problems that you tackle correctly create pull from the market, whereas weak problems require push from your company to the market. To make the parallel, so at Kando, as I said, it started from the market, from people managing nursing homes that saw problems of the coworkers, that had problems themselves. And so the solutions that were envisioned and that were validated with people from the field, they create pull a lot. So without doing outreach, we have been in contact with a lot of different nursing homes at Kando. Whereas at Inside, if I make it black and white, where the thing was more started from the solution, we had to convince people that they had a problem, and once they recognized, we had to convince them that our solution was the best one to use, which again might not be a problem, but then it creates different dynamic and different kinds of sales cycles, right? And so the push, I define it as, okay, you have to convince people they should care about the problem and then about your solution, which takes time, whereas the pull is really meeting a problem that they recognize. And so it's evidence, it's an evidence that they need your solution. And if you want to have good inbound, it starts most of the times with recognized pain points. So when I say a problem that is well framed and a problem that will create a very good business model, is a problem that is recognized. Okay, so the users that they know the pain that they have and they realize it, that is wanted. So it's a problem that people want to find solutions for and they want it right now. Okay, that is payable. So they are ready to spend the money there for solving that problem. And one part that is super important is that there in B2B, there might be a difference between the buyer and the seller. And so the incentives might be completely different. One of the solutions I was managing at Inside, actually the users, they recognize the pain. That's for sure. It was for planning the clinical supply chain of clinical trials. So quite niche, you may say. But one of the problems for having a rapid expansion was that the payers, the buyers, are not the users. So actually the users are supply chain managers, but they have boss that have boss that have boss, and it's at that level in large pharma companies that the buying decision was made, which again creates a problem. And for the buyers, they kind of recognized the pain there, but it was not wanted right now because they had bigger fishes to fry. So they had money, but they had bigger problems that they wanted to solve right now, rather than those problems. So it again created some friction in the sales cycle. Whereas at Kando, the users and the buyers all have added value from the system. Why? Because we work on two different aspects at the same time with a single solution on two different pains. One of the pain is that the managers, the directors of nursing homes, they need to have the reports that are filled. It's a legal obligation. And so they get financial penalties and it creates additional workload for them when the administration is not correctly done. And second pain point is that the nurses or the caregivers that do use our system, they have a high administrative workload. And so by providing the solution that we're providing at Kando, we work on both at the same time. Because filling out the reports and accessing the information is simpler for the users, so for the caregivers, then they have an easier time filling the reports, which means that for the director of the nursing home, they get better and more consistently filled reports. And so this solution and this problem meets all the requirements because it's recognized wanted payable. And in addition to that, and it's a criteria that I see emerging more and more, it must be operationally servable in the sense that the cost of operations must not be so high that it's not payable. An example of that is the companies using large language models. More often than not, they have to be very careful on the usage of large language models if they don't host it themselves, because it can have a cost that makes the business model not viable. So, for me, a good frame of a problem has three main components. The first component is who. So it's really the person, segment, organization that has this problem. So then there is the problem, but the problem needs to be concrete. So it's a concrete pain. So it's not something abstract. It must create friction, delay, risk, or it could also create jobs, right? And it must also, according to me, contain a description of the impact. Okay, so why it matters enough for them to change how they work, because there is also the change management there. One thing I like to think about the problem and the framing is with this question: what is the job to be done that people hired your solutions for? When buying a solution, and it can be a hardware or software solution, they usually hire your solution. It's like they hire somebody to do a job for them. Okay, so whenever you can answer this question, usually you have a way to extract the who, the problem, and the impact. This comes from product managers that were charged of actually researching why McDonald's milkshakes were not as popular as other brands a long time ago. And so they asked this question to the users: what is the job you hired this milkshake for? And based on that, they were able to extract the problem that users were trying to feel. And actually, it was that they were bored into their commutes. And so the solution for McDonald's in this particular problem has been to make the milkshake last longer. And so they would have milkshake for their whole drive. So that's really one thing that I'm using. If I'm not able to answer this question, usually it means that I have a frame that is going to be useful. So one thing that is important also to notice here, it's the difference between the symptoms and the root cause. Because treating the symptoms might work, but will not necessarily work, and will surely not work as good as treating the root cause. So what I mean by symptom is the complaint that they have. Okay, what you ideally need to get to is what creates the pain. One example of that is not a company I work for, but a bank in Belgium, that they saw people complaining, their users complaining about the card reader, that they needed to do some money transfer. And so they thought that the problem was the card reader itself, that it was not functional enough, that it was not making them win time. And so one of the bank decided to give scanning capabilities to the card readers, whereas actually the real root cause was that the card reader was not often available when they needed it, because they were on the go and they didn't have their card reader with them. And so they treated the symptom by creating a more sexy card reader with scanning capabilities, etc., which did not really solve the root cause there, because the people that understood the root cause, they created actually It's Me, that is a system where you can authentify through your smartphone and then not requiring an extra piece of equipment. So one way to get to a real and good problem is to listen, to listen to people. And for that, and also to validate your solution. And for that, I can only recommend reading the book that is called The Mom Test by Rob Fitz something. Sorry, I'll find it out after. Fitzpatrick, sorry. And it's a really good book on how to actually get a problem and test a solution. It's called the mom test because if you ask your mom whether your startup is a good idea, she will say yes. And it's the same for customers or potential users. And so the way is really to ask stories. And I'm emphasizing stories, real stories that are grounded in time. Like the last time you had to do this, what did you do? For instance, so that it's a concrete story and you get the context, because the context is super important. Again, coming back to Inside, one of the solution was solving a problem that supply chain managers had for doing a task that would take them between 5 and 10% of their times. You see, so the context was that this task was done and took 5 to 10% of their task. And even if we could cut that by a factor of 5, for instance, it's still a factor of 5 on 5 to 10% of their job. I guess the context is super important. One thing that's also very important to measure is looking for the efforts to solve the problem. Some users do have problems that they're not trying to solve. They just complain about it, but they're not trying to solve, or they're not trying to solve it right now. They have bigger fishes to fry, as for the buyers with the Inside solutions. And one thing that is very interesting and sometimes hard to do is delay your pitch as much as you can. Because if you ask, and this is the whole point of the book, The Mom Test, if you ask, yeah, is this solution cool? They will say yes. Will they buy that? Maybe they find it a cool solution to a problem that is a minor to them and that they have larger problems to solve. Yeah. And one thing that is, again, becoming more prevalent these days is that with all the nice AI tools and capabilities, much more things become feasible at reasonable costs, right? But it's not because it's technically feasible and possible that it needs to be done, okay? Because again, for all the reasons we discussed, maybe the problem is not prevalent enough, maybe users didn't find a solution for that because they don't actually really need to find a solution for that problem. And so that's really important to make the distinction. And then it's where really a product manager, at least for me, the essence of the role is to make the link between what you can build at reasonable cost and what the user wants. And also linking that to the price that the business can sustain, right? So those are 3 elements: what's feasible, what do the user wants, and what does our business want, because it's also super important. And the clever solution is not a business case. Yeah, so it's important to keep that in mind. So whenever I'm thinking about a problem, that's one of the 2 frameworks I'll be discussing here. And maybe you know it already. So I'm asking the 5 risks, the 5 risks question, and I'm sure to have an answer for those risks, or ways to validate the hypothesis that I have regarding the risk. So the risk, there are 5 main risks that I'm inspecting usually. Is the problem valuable to the user? So meaning, is it close to a must-have? The closer you are to a must-have, the better to a user. So really, the user wants your solution. Is it viable? So is the development, operation, production, deployment, maintenance costs sufficient for your business model to be viable? Is it feasible? So that's the technical feasibility there. So can we build actually a system that will be that will do what we want the system to do, and tackling the problems we want to tackle? Will it be usable by customers there? Because it's also a risk. And is it ethical? Ethical does not mean that necessarily you're doing something unethical, but there is also the kind of second-hand risk of somebody else using your system to do something unethical. And in the end, it poses a risk of coming back to you. So one example there, and I'm going to speak about usability. So one of the problems we solved at Inside was technically feasible. So we had optimization specialists that were doing those crazy algorithms based on Monte Carlo simulations and based on tons of parameters to have really, really nice prediction of what could happen in the supply chain, and allowing the supply chain managers actually to optimize the supply chain. The thing is, it was a a solution made by engineers and optimization engineers, and that was more usable by engineers themselves. And so some of our users had really a hard time using the solution there, because it required to kind of understand what an optimization problem is, what Monte Carlo simulations are, what are their the behaviors, how to interpret the results. So usability risk is also a risk that is important to address. The effect of this usability on Insight solution, the one I was managing, is that it required a lot of support from us, from them at Insight, for users, for helping users. And again, you changed the cost model. So if the usability can be problematic, it's not necessarily that you should put your problem and your solution to the bin, but it means that you should take that into account into the plans of your company. All of these risks, you can say, all right, I don't know. If you don't know, actually, and you don't know, you can design experiments to validate the hypothesis that you would make. And that's also a way to look at those risks. It's not necessarily something you know now, but it's something you must have a plan to have an answer to, ideally before starting. The three risk types that are in purple here on my slide are the ones for which the product manager is mostly responsible to find answers to that. And then the product manager should work as some call the product trio with somebody technical, so a tech lead, for instance, for the feasibility, because the product manager is not supposed to know exactly what's feasible and for which cost. In the end, in normal organization, it's not the product manager developing the product, and the usability is with a designer. And so the product trio is really a product manager that will take those three risks usually, then a technical lead or a lead dev or a CTO, whatever, that will look into the feasibility risk and usable. Usually it's the best results are obtained whenever this trio is on the problem quite early on, so that they can already, while exploring the problem, start discussing those things together and they share the context. And then the last framework for today is one that I like to use because it's quite simple, it's quite visual, and it aligns the different stakeholders at the right level, to my opinion. And it also allows to follow up. It's quite simple. So it's from left to right. It starts with a goal. So always starting with a goal. Like, what do we want to achieve? What is how are we going to measure success? And so usually you discuss the goal at the company level. So with the top management, for instance, if you have top management. Then based on the goal, what needs to be attained for the company. It could be, for instance, in this, so in the France area, I want 5% of the market, and that's in those 5%, the completion rate of reports is at least 95% compared to the 60% of usual completion rate. Then you have opportunities, so or problems. It's just another way of saying problems. Okay. Then you can ask, okay, why are we not reaching that goal yet? Opportunities can be, the rate of completion is that because nurses and caregivers, they do not take the time to fill the reports. Okay, they do not take the time to fill the reports because it's located on a computer in a room that they don't have always access to, right? So then you can start framing problems for reaching a goal. So framing problems that prevent you from reaching the goal. And then for each problem, you can have solutions there that are linked to problems that will solve problems that will help your company reach a goal. And why do I like this framework? It's really because it allows to align. First, it starts with a goal that you can discuss with at the C-level or at the higher management. Then you have a list of different problems that you can investigate, and then a list of solutions. And then you can link back the solutions to the goal and rediscuss the goal after having put a solution on the market for quite some time. Rediscuss the goal where you fit, where the company fits. into reaching the goal with the right persons. And then you have that. And again, as I said, it's quite visual, so everybody's aligned, including like the product management are aligned with the top management, because the product management work mainly at the opportunity level, and then can link back with the higher level management towards between the opportunity and the goal. And then with the engineering team and departments, they can align on, okay, the solution tackles this problem for this goal, and it provides with the engineer, okay, a sense of why they're working, what is the end goal, what is the problem that they're tackling, what is the impact of the problem, and for who they are tackling it. And so that's it for me for today, for the presentation. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thanks a lot, JB. This was
You're welcome.
this was so great, and thank you also for including real life examples like the one from McDonald's, from the bank. It makes it way more tangible. Disclaimer: I'm also a huge fan of opportunity solution trees, but they are sometimes tricky. So when we go into Q&A, I would love to get your perspective on a couple of details. Before that, please join this Slido if you haven't done so yet. This is the moment. This is your moment to ask questions to JB. While you throw in your questions, I will share a bit more about product people. So these are some of the situations where we are typically invited to join teams as interim product managers or product leaders, as coaches for your team, and also to accelerate product discovery. These are some of our clients or success stories. And I'm proud to share that we've supported over 690 teams. We have a team of 40 product leaders and product managers in-house, and also 59% of our team are women. Having said that, let's jump into the Q&A. Cool questions here already. Has AI fundamentally changed how you frame product problems, or is it mostly changing execution rather than strategy?
Yeah, so it's changed the way I do it for different reasons. But the main one is really on the solution validation. So what I do is I create prototypes so that are front end only. So it's really empty behind. So there is a way to create prototypes that was explained in a previous edition of the live stream, if I'm correct. That is very efficient actually. So you can have really quickly a prototype. There are prompts that exist to first create a skill set that will allow you to input the style that you want. If you want the prototype, and that's my case, to be just black and white, really close to wireframes, so that you test the UX more on the screens rather than the colors and the buttons. And so, yeah, prototyping is one way so that I can test better the solutions once I have discovered the problem. One way I'm using it, two other ways I'm using it. So it's first to support me into research there. So when I have large quantities of data, I use AI also to kind of analyze this data and pick up the trends, etc. Of course, I validate everything afterwards there. And one last thing it helps me to do is, as you might have faced in your careers, when you have a documentation software, it quickly gets out of hand with people creating pages a little bit everywhere, and then you're screwed with the structure. And so I have also used AI there with a skill framework and with a direct connection to Notion. We're using Notion here at Kando to actually check the structure. So the rules are encoded in the skill framework, and so it can check and point me to pages that I need to reorganize there. And it's quite convenient because, again, if you put a nice structure, quite quickly it drifts, and if you don't spend all your time there, then it's quite hard. And so it allows me to have all the documentation, all the interviews, guides, and also interviews answers, all the knowledge I have about the users quite nicely organized.
For sharing your perspective, JB. Another question from the audience. How do you validate that you're solving real user problems when most of your user feedback comes through sales rather than direct conversations with users?
Yeah.
So I think this is a pretty common
Yeah.
situation for B2B environments.
Yes. And it's super tricky because the sales, they will tell you, yeah, they have this problem because they heard it once, and then I'm overgeneralizing. Sorry about the sales there. No, what I want to say is it's very hard when you don't have a direct access to your customer base. It's really hard to have it. One thing that worked, but not with all the sales I've worked with, is to try to onboard them into this the product discovery journey and actually help you do it, and you do it with them. And well, based on the conversations, and if you prove them that it's a good idea, based on things that you develop, some of them can actually be helping you doing product framing when they are convinced that this is the right approach. Usually on the first start, when you explain the framework and the way to do it, most of them think it's going to take more time, but after a few iterations, some of them might be convinced and do that partially on your behalf or with you, but with the right approach, not saying, okay, this customer said A, I want A. But it's kind of tricky when you don't have, if you have no access, no whatsoever, then researching a problem might be super complex.
I guess in this case, the opportunity solution tree would come in handy as well to explain sales, what your thinking process is behind tackling one problem or the other. It can help kind of evangelize a little bit.
Yeah, but it needs, you said the word, it needs evangelization, intro. One thing that I did once in one of the company is, because evangelization was quite hard, is to have an external company, a bit like product people. It was not product people, but have coaches from outside helping the organization, helping evangelization. It helps because it's somebody external that comes and provide the same advices that you were providing, but then you're not alone providing the advice. That helps create a way of working together within a product management framework.
Cool. Next question. Then we have a few in the queue. Have you ever deliberately chosen not to solve the highest impact problem? What made that? What made that the right decision?
So I have one example that comes to mind quite easily. So it's at Kando again. So one of the main problems the nurses had were that they spend too much time getting the information about which cares they need to perform on the elderly people, and then having to go into a software to validate the care. So that was really the main problem, the highest impact problem, and the main one. Thing is, that there is also a problem that's slightly less of priority. It's really the call system. So whenever residents in nursing homes press a button, there is a call that is made to a phone, and then the nurses can come and they have to just validate that. And after that, they have to do a call report. We decided to start with the call system. That was not the main problem. The reason why is that the system we propose at Kando is composed in most of the implementation with a box that's connected to the TV, and the nurses can talk to the box. Thing is, it's quite let's say it's quite new for the nursing homes to have that kind of systems, but they're legally required to have a call system. And so by tackling first the call, we were able to easily enter in the nursing homes, and then from there, with the same hardware deployed there, we are now able to say, okay, but we also do have assistants, and the assistants are quite the same as the ones that you use for the call. It's just that they tackle different problems. So you see, we started from a lower priority problem, because it would provide us with entry points at nursing homes and also facilitate adoption afterwards.
Got it. Yeah, very clear example. Another question here. Where do you draw the line between problem framing and solution design? And when do you bring design and engineering in waterfall organizations? This one is very specific.
Yeah. So for the first one, it's not really a line. It's a circle, I would say, because the more you frame the problem, then at some point it's a good idea to start having an idea of the solution, and then based on that you modify the framing of the problem, because while thinking about a solution or starting a prototype, for instance, then you have you have moments where you're like, okay, but in fact that I don't know whether this is worth solving actually that way, and then you come back to the framing, asking more questions, framing more densely the problem. So there's it's a fine line, and it's not a line you cross only once there. And I would say in an ideal world, you start from a goal, then already have the resources that are planned, and very quickly after researching the potential problems, you would start framing the problems involving already the engineering, at least one person from the engineering team and one person from the design team. So the soonest you can. And in waterfall organization, it's quite a challenge because, as I said, it's not a waterfall process. Usually you have to come back to framing, then solution, and back to framing and solution, back to framing and solution. So in really super strict waterfall organizations, yeah, I would say you involve design and engineering on solution discovery, and then you try to have the best problem framing, and you try to be able to update it based on the discoveries done by the solution.
Cool, thanks. Then one more question from the audience. What is the biggest mistake product managers make during discovery?
Pushing for a solution. The pitching, actually. That's I recently had the case at Kando where actually one of the person was showing what he or she had as a solution idea in mind to users, and users were saying, oh yeah, it's nice. But then whenever you were listening to the users, really not talking about the solution, it was not at all a problem that could be solved that way, nor it was the most prevalent problem. So the biggest mistake I would say is to start pitching too early, because in addition to that, if you have a solution in mind, it requires effort not to have confirmation bias saying, oh yeah, you see that my solution is perfect. And if you show it to the users, as in the mom test, if you ask your mom whether your startup is a good idea, she will say yes. It's the same for users.
Right. One question from my side, JB. So what advice would you give to a product manager that is pushing a solution into a problem? So let's say I don't know, you've seen yourself in a situation, maybe because top management wants to build X feature, that you're building this feature, but you haven't done any problem research before. What would be your advice?
So my advice would be to not underestimate evangelization needs, because if you're to apply this framework, the other participants need to believe in this framework, and that requires time and effort. Because if they don't believe in that, they will say, okay, this is the product manager doing his thing. I don't care. I want this feature, and it's just gonna slow everything down. So do not underestimate the evangelization and actually even the learning effort. And it's something that requires for the other stakeholders in your companies to have trust in the process. And so what I would say, my advice would be to start somewhere where you can quickly show the added value of doing that. So to not start everything at once, to try to, if you have multiple stakeholders, maybe to pick the ones that are more convinced or more open to this kind of work, and to really pick one solution or one part of a solution, and then to try where you think you have the best chance of showing added value of the process, so that you can quickly show, at least with these stakeholder that this has an added value, and the stakeholder can become an ally for evangelizing the other ones pushing solutions. So that would be my recommendation.
Got it. Regarding the opportunity solution tree, in your experience, how can you make sure that you don't end up with a huge tree with many branches and then get lost in the branches, basically?
That's a very good question, because whenever you use solution tree, you might have large trees. So what worked already for me a couple of times is to define criteria. Okay, so evaluation criteria. For instance, there it was quite simple. It's complexity and business impact. Okay, note from 1 to 5, and then you multiply the two, so you have one number, and from time to time you cut all the solutions, the potential solutions that are less than, let's say, arbitrary, less than 15. And you cut them and you remove them from the tree. Then if you still have too many, you can review the criteria for those. You can dig a little bit deeper. Then you reapply the criteria, and then you cut those branches. It's really, you have to do the gardener somehow for opportunity solution trees.
Right. So ruthless prioritization every now and then.
Yes. Ruthless is the word. One thing that I keep in mind that allows me to sleep at night, because the first time you do it, you're like, but if we forget this solution, it might be a good one. At least that was my case, that if I'm telling myself, and I strongly believe that if it's a good solution or a good opportunity, it will come back somehow.
Right. And we all know that emotional attachment to solutions is not the way to go.
Or even to backlogs. So here at Kando, I had a hard time because I wanted to delete the whole backlog. I had a hard time convincing people, but I was able to do it. I didn't delete it. We changed tools. So I said, okay, we're going to start from scratch. Which
archiving is kind of the soft deletion alternative.
Yes.
Cool. I think we have time for a couple more questions, and then with this we complete all the questions we had from the audience. You mentioned using AI to analyze when you have larger amount of data. What steps do you take to validate the results?
Okay, so first, it's not just ChatGPT I'm sending PDFs to. It's my PM assistant with a skill.md framework. So where I encoded the principles I'm following. So the principles of product management, how I treat documents, what I'm trying to extract from it. I also ask him to ask me actually to review each time. Okay, is something unclear? Do ask me. So it's really something that has been, and I modify it from time to time because I see the answers are not correct. And so the steps I'm taking is I'm asking him to provide the sources why it's he's telling me that, so that I can check. So I obviously do not have the time to check everything, but usually checking the biggest claims is already enough to give you confidence there. And in any case, after having had this first analysis, I go on the field and I try to see users for myself to validate that indeed they feel that pain. And I know that the information might be less qualitative than if I went through the documents. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but the thing is, I believe that having the information, even if it's slightly less quality, it's better than not having any information because I don't have the time to go through all the documents. So that's why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Last questions. Last question, singular. Have you seen companies successfully walk away from a feature after launch because they realized they had solved the wrong problem?
Huh. The so after launch, that's a complex question, and it's a super interesting one. First, as I said during the questions or the talk, I think killing a feature is super hard for companies. So it's something I'm always impressed to see a company do. Like for instance, Nabla, they did cut at some point 80 to 90% of their products. So they were providing the wrong solution actually to their eyes, and so that's super impressive to do. So you won't be able in 100% of the cases to actually kill the feature, but for me the best way is well, to be honest, to analyze why it didn't work and what they can repurpose of the solution. And even if you don't want to lose face, for instance, you could keep the feature there and then work on something else to not admit that you were wrong. And the way it works, because you will have some strong some strong pushback when you're trying to do so, is to measure. So to have data on the feature usage, on the impact, on the cost. If you have data and start collecting data, and then you can base the discussions based on the data, not on the feelings that there are between between those discussions. But yeah, it takes time. And one practical thing I would do in that case is, if I can't convince people to kill it, is to try to convince people to focus on other problems, so that the feature will stay as it is if it doesn't cost too much in operations. And that's also part of the data that you could collect, support those discussions. I would leave it on the side and convince people to focus on other problems or other solutions to the same problems. But without data, it's really an emotional discussion, and so you won't be able to make progress easily in that case.
Yeah. Great piece of advice. Thanks a lot, JB, for sharing your
You're
experience
welcome.
with us, and thank you, audience, for joining us today and also sharing your thoughtful questions. Um, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to our newsletter. And if you enjoyed this live stream, next week we have Matt Winter, head of product at Dojo, to discuss how to hire great product people in your team. Thank you everyone for joining, and have
Thank
a
you for having
lovely
me.
Tuesday.